Hero old man saves girl from knife-wielding maniac during UK train attack. Victims fought back with Jack Daniels bottle. It started like any other evening commute. The sun had dipped low behind the London skyline, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple. The 1842 train from Reading to London Paddington rolled calmly along the tracks, a familiar rhythm of steel and speed. Inside Carriage 7, the atmosphere was quiet. Passengers scrolled through phones, listened to music, or stared out the window. A few murmured conversations filled the air, the kind that fade into white noise after a long day. Sitting near the middle of the carriage was George Mason, 72 years old, a retired Navy engineer with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. His gray coat was neatly buttoned, his suitcase tucked by his feet. Across from him sat a young woman, maybe 22 or 23, reading a novel and occasionally smiling at the pages. George glanced at her, amused. She reminded him of his granddaughter. Same quiet focus, same spark of curiosity. He thought of the family dinner waiting for him in London that night. A normal evening, a normal journey. Or so he thought. When the train stopped at Slough Station, the door slid open with a hiss. A handful of new passengers climbed aboard. Among them, a tall man in a dark hoodie. He moved quietly, almost too quietly, his face half hidden beneath the hood. He didn't carry a bag. He didn't check his seat number. He just stood near the doors, one hand buried deep inside his pocket. Something about him felt off. George noticed it immediately, that subtle tension in his shoulders, the way his head twitched slightly as if tracking something invisible. Years in the Navy had trained George to recognize danger before it struck. He couldn't explain it, but something deep in his gut whispered, something's wrong. The train began to move again, cutting through the darkness. The sound of the rails was steady, comforting, but in the next few moments, that comfort shattered. It happened fast, too fast. The man suddenly stepped forward, pulling a knife from his pocket. The metallic sound sliced through the air, sharp, terrifying. He didn't say a word, didn't demand anything. He just began swinging wildly. Screams erupted. People ducked, pushing against the seats, scrambling for space. Bags fell, coffee spilled. Panic spread like fire through the narrow carriage. The young woman beside George froze, her book dropping to the floor. The attacker's blade flashed inches from her face. And that's when George moved. Without hesitation, he lunged forward, grabbing the man's wrist with both hands. The suddenness caught the attacker off guard. George's grip was strong, stronger than anyone expected from a 72-year-old. He shoved the man backward, forcing him against the seats. "Run!" George barked at the girl. "Get behind me." The young woman stumbled away, tears streaming down her face. The attacker snarled, twisting, trying to break free. George held on tight, muscles trembling. For a split second, the train felt like a war zone. The roar of the engine, the screams, the metallic clang of the knife as it struck the armrest. Passengers rushed for the emergency brake. Someone shouted for help. Another started filming, their hands shaking. In the chaos, one passenger, a broad-shouldered man in his 30s, Liam Patterson, a construction worker from Birmingham, noticed a glass Jack Daniels bottle rolling across the aisle. It had fallen from someone's shopping bag. Without thinking, Liam snatched it up and swung. The bottle connected with the attacker's shoulder, sending a dull crack through the carriage. The man stumbled, the knife slipping from his hand and skidding across the floor. The moment it hit the ground, George kicked it away, hard, sending it under his seat. "Hold him," George shouted. Liam grabbed the attacker from behind, pinning his arms. Another passenger, a woman in her 40s, pressed the emergency alarm, and the train began to slow. The attacker struggled violently, but the passengers refused to let go. They were terrified but united. When the train finally screeched to a halt, armed officers stormed aboard within minutes. They tackled the man, cuffed him, and pulled him out of the carriage. And just like that, the nightmare was over. The aftermath was quiet, eerily quiet. The passengers sat in shock, breathing hard, clutching their phones and bags as if holding on to reality itself. Some were crying softly. Others just stared at the floor, George sat back down, his hands trembling. His sleeve was torn, his wrist bruised. But he was alive. The young woman he protected was sitting opposite him now, tears in her eyes, whispering thank you over and over. When paramedics arrived, they treated minor cuts and bruises, nothing more serious. No one had lost their life, thanks to the bravery of a few quick thinkers. As police escorted the attacker away, reporters gathered at the next station, already calling it the train hero incident. When George was asked by a young journalist why he'd done it, why he'd risked his life to save a stranger, his reply was simple. I didn't think about it. You see someone in danger, you act. That's all there is to it. Later that night, after giving a statement, George sat alone at the station cafe, sipping lukewarm tea. His hands still shook slightly from the adrenaline. He could still hear the sound of that knife hitting the seat, still see the fear in that young woman's eyes. But he also remembered something else, the courage that came out of nowhere from ordinary people. A man with a bottle, a woman pressing the alarm, dozens of strangers helping each other. It reminded him that bravery isn't loud. It's not cinematic. It's just human. When the young woman found him again to thank him one last time, she hugged him tight. He smiled awkwardly, murmuring something about how he just did what anyone should do. But inside, he knew most wouldn't have. That night, George became a quiet symbol of courage. Proof that age doesn't dull bravery, and that sometimes the smallest actions can stop the worst from happening. In a world where fear often silences people, a 72-year-old man reminded everyone that courage isn't about strength or speed. It's about heart. That train could have been another tragedy. Instead, it became a story of unity, bravery, and the power of ordinary people standing up to chaos. So the next time you hear about an act of courage, remember George Mason, because heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just carry the courage to stand up when it matters most. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-life tales of courage, crime, and survival. This is a Lazy Detective, and until next time, stay alert, stay safe.